Welcome to the Millennial Money Canada podcast, a podcast to elevate your financial planning literacy so that you can live well, build wealth, give generously, and leave a legacy that you're proud of. I'm Guillaume, Girard, financial planner, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Lichtman, founder and financial planner at Millennial Wealth Advisors. And the topic of today, we had a wonderful guest, David Edey, author of The Executor Help, How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. It was published in 2021. This is a self-help book that provides clear and concise guidance on the importance of appointing an executor, understanding the executor's role, and ensuring a family's wealth and well-being are preserved. David Edey shares real-life examples to illustrate potential challenges and offer advice on effective estate planning and communication to prevent family conflicts. He is a certified executor advisor with over 35 years of experience in the financial planning industry in Montreal. His personal experience is pretty fascinating. I read his book. He spent 7 years and $50,000 in legal fees to settle his parents' estate, and they had a written will. And that motivated him to write his book and help others navigate estate planning and executorship successfully. So let's get to the episode. David Edey, welcome to the Millennial Money Canada podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Taking the time, having a good conversation with you guys. Looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Can you explain the role of an executor and why it's such a critical responsibility in estate planning?
Okay, well, first off, it's a job that nobody wants. It's the worst job that anybody can have. But you have to think, if you take on the job and understanding the responsibility, you have to, we see right here, there's so many things that an executor is responsible for. So think of the executor as sort of the captain of the ship being the estate. And they're going to make sure that they, keep the beneficiaries in order, keep them informed, work with the tax department, work with, a real estate agent, all sorts of professionals to make sure that they can settle the estate and make sure that it's done professionally, done on time, and with the least amount of fights and anguish. And that's a tough thing. There's so many responsibilities, and a lot of people take on the job and they really don't know what they're saying yes to.
Do you find that a lot of people are surprised to find out they're the executor for someone's estate, or is this something that normally in your experience has been discussed beforehand?
I'd say 90%, probably 75%. A lot of times people know that they're executor, but that's all they know. They don't know what's involved in the job. And then those who are surprised by it, they take it on and they are overwhelmed by what's involved in taking on the job. It's a tough job. It's a job, like I said, nobody wants. It's the worst job that you could ever be asked to be part of.
And is that just because you feel that there's so much responsibility and expectations placed on the executor to go alongside potential family disputes, and maybe there hasn't been good communication? Or is it just the breadth of everything you have to do as an executor that just is overwhelming?
I think it's a little of all of that, because I'd say 80% of people who are asked to be executors have no idea what's involved. They don't know where to start because there's so many things coming at them. They've got to, again, deal with the tax department. They have to deal with digital assets. They've got to deal with the beneficiaries. They've got to deal with the funeral home. They've got many things that can be overwhelming. And if an individual, first off, hasn't been prepped for it, and they're also dealing with grief, then this is where they can get into trouble. This is where it can be overwhelming for a lot of people.
So before accepting the role of an executor, what would be like the essential steps that you'd recommend someone to do?
First off, if you are asked to, because most people take on the job because they feel it is an honor that they're being asked. And the person who's asking the individual to be the executor, you're asking someone to do a giant favor for you. You're asking them to spend anywhere between 18 to 24 months of their life, and a lot of times they're going to have to take time from work to settle the estate. You're asking them to spend up to 100 hours to make sure that the estate is settled in a timely and efficient way. To take on that job, you have to say, what is because time is something that you can't put a price on, but it's very expensive. So what's going to be the return on investment? So that 100 hours, what is it taking me away from? It's taking me away from my family. It's taking me away from my job. I'm going to have to ask for time off to settle the estate. And on top of that, you may have to deal with beneficiaries who might be difficult and make your life a lot harder than it needs to be. So it has to take a pretty deep conversation between the testator, the individual who's making the will and whose estate it is, and the executor, the person that they've chosen to take on the responsibility, and see if, they probably may not say no, again, because they think it's an honor, but a lot of times they have no idea what's involved. So you have to take in consideration, what am I getting involved with? How are you going to help me, the testator, and as the executor, how are you going to help me be prepared when and if I have to take on the duties?
How do you determine if you are the good fit to take on that responsibility beyond being honored?
How do you know?
Yeah.
There's no one right answer, because a lot of people, I mean, I have a friend of mine, she was asked to be an executor, and she knew that her, she was asked to be executor of her uncle's estate, and she knew that her cousins didn't get along, and she didn't want to be involved with that. So she, out of the blue, she didn't know she was the executor, and she got an email and a letter saying that she was the executor of her uncle's estate. And she told them she knew what was going to be involved, dealing with the beneficiaries, not so much settling the estate, the material part, the financial part. It was the relationships between her cousins, and she didn't want to get involved with that. So she promptly denied. She asked to a certified letter and renounced the being asked to taking on the responsibility of the executor. So
I imagine sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I imagine it's a lot more fun to find out that you're named as beneficiary on some estate than you're named as executor as a surprise, right? Like hearing some of the stories, both successful executor and closed estates, and then some of the conflicts that happen in those situations. It's a very overwhelming process. And I've helped clients close estates before, dealt with family members and those types of things, as I know you have extensive experience in dealing with in your practice as well. I find that in that process, people are just generally uneducated as to what an executor actually has to do. They think it's just, okay, well, I'll go and I'll grab all the statements and we'll submit it and we'll have advisors that'll help us out. But in reality, you're on the phone with the CRA, you're on the phone with the accountant telling people like, hey, we've got to file the final return, and surprise, so-and-so hasn't filed their taxes in the last 3 years, right? Those things all come up in those conversations and situations. So going back to the communication piece of, if we're talking for the moment to people who are naming executors on their estate, what should they be telling the executors and communicating to those people beforehand to ensure that they make the estate process as seamless as possible?
Well, you want to make sure, as the testator, individual whose estate it is to make sure that you've created a binder, a folder, where the will is going to be held, the logins and passwords, investment statements. You've got the name of an accountant, your lawyer, a financial advisor. So there's at least some sort of file to start with. And then if you know the family dynamics and you know there could be problems, because every family is, I like to say, every family is messy. It's a dirty little secret. Everybody thinks, oh no, everybody thinks they're the Brady Bunch, and it's not happening. So what's going to happen is you're going to also have to have the conversation with the beneficiaries. And if something was to happen, Sam is the executor, and these are my wishes. Please, follow what he's going to be going through. Again, you're taking 18 to 24 months to settle the estate. Sometimes, in my case, it was 7 years. And we spent 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 to settle the estate. And my parents had a will. The only thing is they didn't communicate to the rest of us. I mean, some of the children knew that there was a will and others didn't. And that's where the problem was. There wasn't any communication.
Can you talk about, I want to drive this point, I want to dive deeper into this importance of communication, especially as everyone is alive. And I'm not sure how you grew up around money, but the way I grew up around money is you don't talk about money, right? And so every family is different. But from your experience, how do you recommend a family to address those, what I would qualify as difficult conversations around being named an executor, talking with the beneficiaries, who can expect to get what? Because those are very delicate topics, and depending on the relationship between the parents and the kids, some it can be harmonious, but if it's, I know some families where, oh my God, they're probably just waiting for me to almost pass away to get what I'm going to leave them and whatnot. So can you talk about what are the recommended actions to take to have these communications in order to make the process easier?
Well, first off, there's three types of families. Like you were saying, one family, they don't talk about money. So there's the family that it's going to avoid the situation, because if they talk about it, they think that death is going to come or something bad is going to happen. And there's the family that, yes, there's a will, but nobody knows what's in it. And that was kind of like what happened in my family. So we let the paperwork do the talking, and that's where the problems are. And then there's the family who understands that this is what's going to happen in life. Spoiler alert, we're all going to die. So, and we want to make it as easy on the next generation that we're passing on our assets to. And so that's the third type of family. So I like to say that intensive care is no place to find out that there's no will, and you can never have a meaningful conversation with somebody when they're on a respirator. So the time to have, even though we might dread the conversation, the time to have the conversation is now. Don't wait, because you never know when a situation might come up. So yes, is there going to be some uncomfortable feelings? Absolutely. Like I said, all families are messy. So that's where a lot of times the avoidance comes about. But there's also people who take the view, hey, I'm going to be dead. What will it matter? So they're apathetic about it. But you know what? Why would you want to leave your family disorganized and in chaos? Is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to talk about their demise. When my parents did their will, they were in my office. And even though I sat through hundreds of client interviews and, sat down with the lawyer with them and stuff like that, the day my parents came in, I wasn't in the room because I couldn't fathom them passing away. So it's uncomfortable. And even for me, with someone it's over 35 years of experience, I couldn't handle it. So you have to get over the difficult conversations and have them, and don't be afraid of them.
I think there's this inherent concept of fair versus equal, right? And that also comes into play when separating an estate. Now, whether or not that should come into play, we often encounter situations where, let's say, parents have done a will. One child ends up being the primary caregiver while they're in their later year, still only gets a third or a half or whatever their percentage allocation is in relation to their siblings, but feels maybe entitled to a little bit more. As those parents age and expectations are set out while they're healthy, should they be considering those types of things, like if someone is primary caregiver or if someone is putting a lot of work while everyone else is maybe in other provinces or other areas? I guess that's a hard question to answer of should they do it, but maybe should there be communication around those topics before they get to the stage of needing that more intensive care?
Yes, you hit it on the head, that someone's taking care of the primary care, but it comes down to the conversation. At the end of the day, the matriarch, the patriarch, mom and dad, it's their estate. They could do whatever they want. The problem is we've got a family, or in society, that children feel entitled, that they're entitled to whatever mom and dad had. But mom and dad could do whatever they want. And that's the problem. And that's where we get into the problems with inheritances, because people think that they're entitled to something. You can do whatever you want. If mom and dad decide they want to give it to, save the elephants in Africa, that's their business. It's not up to you to say, hey, mom, dad, you got to take care of us. No, they only had to take care of you up until you're 18. Maybe gave you a roof over your head, but now you're a grown person. So now look after yourself, and don't look for that sort of thing. So now, if you know that and that's a lot of times where parents are afraid to bring up the subject of what they're leaving behind. And then that's why they they don't say anything and let the paperwork do the talking. So then what ends up happening is we end up with fights. But if mom and dad say, this is what my wishes are, and the reason why I'm giving a little bit more to, the primary caregiver, and, again, the other siblings might get their nose out of joint. There's nothing they can do about it. They could get mad, but it's you're not entitled to it. You really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. And that's where there's going to be a problem. And families don't want to have those messy conversations. I'm not saying you have to do the conversation one time and we're done. It's going to be something that you're going to have family meetings over time. But get used to that this one day, the direction of the family is going to change because mom and dad aren't going to be there anymore. And how are you going to handle it? I've got friends who, their kids don't want to, if they bring it up, the parents bring it up, kids don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about this. I guess I would, at that point, I was of the same sort of situation as well, but it has to take place. Again, intensive care is no place to find out that there's no will. And if you're on a respirator, we're not going to have really good conversations.
I'm going to ask if I can steal that line when talking to clients.
Yeah.
Intensive care is no place to find out that there's no will. That's an excellent point, and driving that home is so important. Yeah, I have a question just around Executor specifically. Because of you've laid out very clearly the amount of time this is going to take, between 18 to 24 months potentially, or longer if there's disputes. Should executors expect to be compensated for their time as executors? Should they request that? What is your general thoughts around executor compensation, or does that just add more complication and fights into the mix because someone's getting paid a little bit more? Maybe they're not even a beneficiary, or maybe they are a beneficiary, and all of a sudden that means they're getting a little bit more of the estate. How do you view that?
Well, this is where it gets into a little bit of a messy part. Excuse me. If you're already a beneficiary and you're also executor, you may, it's up to the testator, the individual whose estate it is, to make that decision. Well, you know what? You're taking a little bit of extra time. I'm just going to give you a little bit more. Okay. But a lot of times executors are also the beneficiaries. They don't expect to be paid. That's totally up to the testator. That's why there's also majority of people are asking friends or relatives to be executor, but that's why there's also a push or a little bit of a shift in some estates that people are hiring professionals. They're going to trust companies, banks, or they're going to professional executors because they don't know the family messiness. They know what to do. They're a third party and they're going to just be paid to settle the estate. They're not going to get involved with the family drama because they don't know the family drama. But you also have to take in consideration if you want to go that route, and I'm not saying that's the right route either, because it's totally up to you how you want it to go, and depending on your family situation. Is it a blended family? You don't have any, beneficiary, whatever. If you choose to go that professional route, then I expect that there's going to be less in the estate because there's going to be fees. There's going to be a cost to it. So you have to weigh which makes sense for it to go the way you'd hope to be, because you're not going to be here, but you have to have a little bit of vision, what you like to happen to your.
Can you talk about the fees that people can expect while going through the professional route for hiring an executor? And I don't know if that varies by provinces either, but just from your experience.
It's usually a percentage. Maybe there's a flat fee to start, and there's a percentage of the estate. Every institution has their own pricing model. So if that's what you're thinking of going that route, then just do your homework and do a little bit of research, ask some questions.
Well, I've seen some price tags around $30,000, $40,000 to settle some estates as they get larger. Am I way off base with that, or is that something that?
I had a friend who was fairly large estate, and he was complaining that he was being charged for the faxes being sent to him to sign papers and stuff. So, it's a business, but if that's the route that you want to go and you have a large enough estate, then it may make sense because it takes out that third party, not involved with your family drama and your messiness.
So the first part of this episode, we mostly touch on, before the death, having the conversations, even before reading your book, I was under the impression that someone could work with a lawyer, draft a very well detailed will, wouldn't necessarily have to disclose anything, and the will itself would be implemented and carried out as their wishes, and nothing would happen. That was my naivety or impression. Then while reading your book, I learned a lot about the consequences that can happen, and even talking with you, reinforcing the point that yes, that's the first part to even have a will, and 50% Canadians don't have one. But now you need to actually have meaningful conversations about it to prevent family disputes and all that stuff. So now moving into, once the person has passed, what is the first thing that an executor should do after someone has passed away?
Take time to grieve. All this other stuff that we're talking about, the business side, that's just not, I'm not going to say nonsense, but that's the business side. Take time to grieve. On my podcast, I talked to grief experts, and they said that one expert recently told me that grief is just love looking for somewhere to go. This is going to shake your world. It's going to change your view of how life is. So take time to grieve. Everybody's going to grieve differently. But if you got on the added responsibility of being an executor, take time to grieve, gather yourself, and get ready for the next step, which is handling the estate. So you need to take care of yourself, grieve, and then get organized, because you have a big job ahead of you.
That's a very important point you're making. I know too that sometimes from experience on this, if you dive into something right after a significant loss, right, maybe it takes your mind off of it, but that doesn't mean like you won't still experience that sense of loss, the grief at a later point in time. If I can get personal on here, and I'm comfortable sharing this, our daughter was stillborn back in 2021. And that to me was one of those things. I was in the middle of a business transition. It was an awful experience, but being so caught up in work, I actually didn't have time or process things appropriately until December of that year, when I was able to take a breath and all of a sudden realize, like, oh my gosh, like I'm really feeling this now. And the grief side of things is so important to process. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. Sorry for your loss. And I hope you celebrate her every day.
Yeah.
The grief is indescribable. Like, I lost my parents within 18 months of each other, both to cancer. So I like to say F cancer. And at that point, you don't expect, it's the first time anything closer, what they say, the impact zone. It's something so close, which was my parents. And for me, you see your life going maybe a straight line, and you're going about your business. And now this has happened. And now everything seems to either tilt to the left or the right. Nothing seems the same. Nothing seems straight anymore. Everything is altered. And that's the hard part of the grief. And I can understand when, recently I have a friend lost her husband to ALS, and I can see the patterns of grief. Everybody grieves differently. A lot of people don't know how to handle the grief. People around you, they say time heals all wounds, or people say a lot of nonsense, and they don't know what you're going through, and they're never going to know what you're going through. They can sympathize with you. So that's why I say take time to grieve. And if the beneficiaries, they're grieving, and you as the executor, you've got your grief, and then you've got this business, the business of settling the estate to take care of. People that are the beneficiaries, they are only interested in, at this point now, is when am I going to get paid? When am I getting my check? When am I getting my stuff? They're not, and they're also handling the grief in their own way, but now you are individual number one, standing in the way of getting what they feel they're entitled to, and they feel they're entitled to it quickly, right away.
Yeah.
So
I think that's so important to communicate to people. And I hope people listening to this can understand that when there is an estate settlement, someone's passed away, that the person that you've mentioned is now, as their view, standing in the way of the money. They're the clog in the funnel of when the money is going to come. They're still going through the same grief. If they're like, if it's a parent or something like that, named their child, or a close friend or family member, they're still grieving as well. And so if we can have empathy in those situations and allow a little bit of time to process those things, that's so important to establish that level of communication with every party involved. So I think that's such an important part and I'm learning so much on this podcast here from you. So I think that's such an important part to communicate. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It's again, this is, stuff that people are uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about. I'm pretty sure, I'm going on a limb, this is the least sexiest topic that you guys are going to cover on your show ever. This is the least sexy because nobody wants to talk about this, but we're all going to be affected by it in some way, sooner or later. It could be our own, leaving this earth, or it could be people close to us or people we know. Everybody knows somebody who's been through this. So now here's the time that we can learn how to prepare, talk about death and be organized. Because everything that we're talking about here and getting organized, organizing your executor, this is the greatest gift of love that you can give to your family. Because you've taken the time now not to leave them disorganized in chaos. Recently, a friend of mine, actually a week ago, a friend of mine I hadn't talked to in a while, I thought she had ghosted me. And all of a sudden she popped up. She said, hey, give me a call. I gave her a call and said, hey, what's going on? She told me she had cancer. So I'm just assuming, okay, what stage are you in? She goes, I'm in stage 4. She says, they've given me less than a year, maybe 4 to 5 months. And all she was concerned about was her sons and her husband to make sure that her investment property would be organized so that it will be part of her legacy to leave to her kids. And that's why I said to her, that's the greatest gift of love that you can give your family is to be organized. Because she said, when it came to the digital assets, her logins and passwords, when she first went in to the hospital, she was unconscious for 5 days. Her husband didn't know the bank accounts, how to log into them. He didn't know the passwords. He didn't know any of this. And then when she was able, came to, she was able to, through memory, he handed her the phone and she was able to remember the password. And that got her to thinking, I need to take care of those digital assets. And that's another area that the executor has to be concerned about. Because for every one email address, there's at least 130, 160 digital identities related to that email address. So that's Netflix, that's your banking, that's your Amazon, all of those things that need to be taken care of. And if something happens to you, who can get into those bank accounts? Who can get into your Amazon, your social media? It's all lost. So you also have to prepare the executor with a list of logins and passwords if something was to happen.
What's the best way for someone the testator who is still alive, what is the best way to gather all this information and basically hand this over to the executor? Well, or after they pass, it will be handed over to the executor in your avenue. Is it digital? Is it written? Is it a binder?
There's different products. On my website, there's a product called Future File where everything is put into a binder and you've got everything organized. All you want to do is make sure you're organized. If something was to happen, think of it as the emergency glass. If something was to happen, break the glass and pull the. So if something was to happen, I like to say you leave in a brightly colored file. So a bright blue file, a bright orange file, a bright envelope or something like that. Because when something like this happens, people are traumatized, okay? And you can't find anything when you're traumatized because you're just scrambling around. But if you were to say, if something was to happen, doesn't mean you're dead, but I'm in the hospital and I'm sick or something like that, go into the filing cabinet and look for that bright orange file. In there, you're going to find everything that you're going to need. So you want to make it easy on the individual, whether it's the executor or someone who's going to be helping you out who has the power of attorney. You want to make it easier on them and keep that in a brightly colored binder file or something and let somebody know where it is.
We're going to include a link to your website for this in the show notes here. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find it in the description. If you're listening to our podcast on Apple or Spotify, you'll find it in the show notes. So we'll include a link to that virtual file that you have on your site or the process on your site to get that started, and also showcase your executor services there as well, or resources there as well.
The other thing I would also say is if you just go on the resource section on my website, there's a free executor checklist.
Amazing.
And you can download that, put that in your bright orange file. And so this way, it's just giving the guideline to the executor what they need to do. And it's also going to give the testator and say, okay, they're going to need to know all of this. I need to get this all organized.
Before we move to the challenges and family disputes and everything that bad that could happen after someone has passed, I just want to ask you one more questions around grief. So I've been with my fiance for 13 years, okay? And in 13 years, she lost her grandpa in the fall. And that's the first person that has passed since we've been together. Why I'm saying this to you is we have not experienced much grief in the past decade or so. And I'm somewhat fearful of how the next 10 to 20 years will go, because I believe that it may all happen, within a short period of time, from the grandparents to the parents, the uncles and whatnot. In your experience, what's the best way people have handled grief? And that can be in many different ways. But what you've seen, what have they done and how have they handled it? And how have they been successful at grieving before moving to the executor process?
That's a hard question because everybody's going to take it differently. The important thing is that you need to get your rest. You need to understand, because you can see, friends that I see that are grieving. It takes them, and it depends on who the individual is and what I've heard is called the impact zone, how close they are. So is it it was your fiance and her grandpa, but if it's different than if it's a husband and a wife, the wife loses the husband or vice versa. And that's closer to the impact zone. It's even closer. So everybody's going to handle it differently. You need to be able to talk about it. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear. A lot of people, when they're grieving, they're going to have, first week or two, they're going to have people all around them and, oh, are you okay? And blah, 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 blah. Slowly but surely, they're going to disappear and they're not going to check in. So the friends that I've had, the one lady that lost her husband recently to ALS, I would, give her a call. Luckily, we golf together, or I'll give her a call. And then I have another client. He lost his wife, and I talked to him on the phone, and then I went and visited him at his house, and it's almost close to a year now, and he every time I would go to his house, he would just be crying. He would just cry. And then, he even got to the point was, why am I still here? Why did cancer take my wife? But you also just want to support them, whoever it is. Just listen. Some days they're going to talk, some days they're going to cry. Just listen. And in his case, I just, gave him, positive things. His daughter just gave birth to twins. And I told him that, I said, Malcolm, you need to be here because you need to tell them the stories about Jennifer. You need to be here and tell them what a great, when you read stories and tell them about Jennifer. So handling grief, everybody's going to handle it differently, but you have to take care of yourself. And if you have to look after somebody or be around somebody who's grief, don't be afraid. You need to help them as much as you can and just listen and take directions from them.
That's such a good point too. And even as we were going through our grief process, one of the things we learned was that, number one, it's not linear. It doesn't happen and then stop happening. And there's all this, academic or thoughts around like the stages of grief and all of these things, and assuming it's sequential. And then like after 6 months, you're going to be okay. But, maybe the memory, this is not real life. Right? There's anniversaries, there's birthdays, there's random times you're driving and all of a sudden you're thinking of that person and it hits you. And those are, I think, when it comes to, can you plan for this? You can't. But as a support person being there for someone in that situation, you can't solve any problems for them. And that's the hardest part about being a support person. And I recognize that from people who are people in our lives, is that they were trying to do good things and trying to say the right things, but there really isn't a right thing to say in those moments. And your point about being able to listen and offering your support as just being there in their presence or just checking in or those types of things, I think that is the most meaningful thing you can do versus trying to say, well, time heals all wounds, like you mentioned earlier. As a Christian myself, God has a plan for everything. That's the worst thing you can hear in those moments, because I don't want to go too in depth in it, but those are some of those things where if you are a support person in those roles, be there. You can ask questions and don't be afraid to ask questions. Allow them to talk about the plans they had for that person in our situation, or the experiences they had with that person. And I'm by no means a grief counselor, but we saw grief counselors in that time. And it really allowed us to view our daughter's memory with very fondly, and the plans we had, and grieve the plans we had for her, while also still being okay with the fact that it's sad that she's not here and that we're never going to be able to experience that. And so anyway, that's just my own personal experience on this as well. And I appreciate, David, you sharing yours too. And I think it's a great question.
But three of us, we're all advisors. We got individual personal grief stories, but then we also have to put on our professional hats where we're going to have clients that are going to be in the same situation. Like I had to go, sit with Malcolm in his kitchen and listen to him. And you have to, as an advisor, this is someone that you knew the wife, you helped, plan their retirement, and now she's gone, and you can see that the family is rocked. He's rocked. So as an advisor, you also have to be able to, sit and just listen. A lot of times, just listen. Let them bring you photos. Let them talk about how they met. All of those things, and just make them. Because a lot of times, people who are grieving, they just want to be heard. They don't want to be told, stuff. God has a plan for you, or they're in a better place. They don't want, because I've come to this point. Excuse my language. And when it comes to this sort of situation, people are assholes. They just don't. They just don't know what to say, and they just say stuff that makes them feel good, and it's not helping the individual. So if you have nothing, if you can't think of something to say that's going to be comforting, either listen or shut up. That's it. Sorry.
Man, I love this work so much, man. This is exactly why I wanted to get into, this work, is to get so intertwined with the personal lives of people. And when you get to that point, like you said, like this is way beyond any advisory role. Like you're helping them navigate some really challenging part of life. And, I don't know, it's just amazing that we get to play that role.
I think also we as advisors, we also have to take in consideration, we are handling people's money. We're helping them with their money. And there's nothing more personal than somebody's money. And they've entrusted us. We've built the relationships with us, and we can't take it for granted. But this is a part of life as advisors that we also have to be cognizant of. How can we help if a family's in a difficult situation? How can we make it easier on them when they're grieving?
Do you want to talk about what is the most challenging aspect of settling an estate and how executors can prepare for it? And let me know if you want me to share the graph again.
The most difficult part being an executor?
No, the most challenging aspect of settling an estate, like the main challenges and issues are usually arising while
the main challenge is that you can't do the job alone. So you need to at least have, I say, a base of professionals that you got to work with. So you need to have an accountant, you need to have a lawyer, you need to start with a financial advisor. Those are the basic three. But you're probably, as an executor, probably going to deal with another 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 professionals. You're going to have to deal with a real estate agent. You may have to deal with a individual who does estate sales. You may have to deal with someone who's going to have to look after pets. So there's a whole lot of professional that the executor is going to have to deal with. But to make it easier on the executor, the testator should at least make it easier in terms of, having a name of an executor, having the name of the financial advisor, having the name of the lawyer that drew up the will. Those are the three basic ones to help you get the job going. Because again, 85-90% of most people with the job, they have no idea what to do. They have no idea where to start and who to talk to. But you can make it a lot easier if you know that you can talk to a lawyer, financial advisor, and an accountant.
I think the financial advisor in this situation, as being a financial advisor, maybe I'm biased, but the financial advisor needs to, with clients, needs to be the person spurring this conversation forward, right? In terms of talking to the clients and saying, okay, listen, we're going to start getting you organized now. And we're going to make sure that if anything happens, we have all of this contact information on file to pass on to the executor. We've got a list of your assets, especially if you're a financial planner. We've got the planning software with the detailed list of up-to-date assets. We've got all the contact information here. And then when the executor comes to the primary planner, it's almost like a one-stop shop. Here's the mortgage information. Here's the account information. Here's the held away accounts. Here's the location of the will. Here's everything that you need. And that, as an advisor in my role, is really, really important in a part of overall financial planning. And I know we've got some advisors that listen to this podcast. That definitely should be something, even if you're younger clients. Like we work with millennials mostly. We have those comprehensive list of assets in our files for millennials so that because things happen, right? But so that we can ensure that if there is anything bad happening, someone can contact us with a copy of the will saying, or that they're executor, and we can basically say, here's everything. Here's all the information. Here's a detailed itemized list. Everything that they've disclosed to us, here it is. And then even prompt the clients more to say, is there anything you haven't disclosed here? Any investment assets like precious metals, jewelry, those types of things. We can get those disclosures from clients. They're comfortable disclosing those things because there's a reason why. That is really powerful and can enhance the settlement of the estate process from my understanding as well.
Yeah. And well, as advisors, it's the added value that we're added to the client. Over and above the rates of return and, where's the diversification? Where should we be in, what sector should we be in? This is another part of what we do in terms of adding value to the client. Not like what you see on television where, the professor's telling you that the fees that you're paying. And, if you just did it, we add value. End of story. If I could just reach out and choke that guy. But anyway, let's just move on. Sorry. That was my inside voice talking to me. Sorry. Anyway, so we're adding value to the client. And this is just one part of the area of comprehensive financial planning, is that we're taking care of the estate and we're taking care if something was to happen. And again, intensive care is no place to find out. There's no will.
Is there any legal exposure there while you're being an executor?
Short answer, yes.
Yeah. Can you elaborate them?
Because you're the administrator of the executor, so you're going to be held responsible. So as an executor, you need to make sure that you aren't doing anything that's against, because you're supposed to be acting in the best interests of the estate. Okay, so you can't be doing any sort of shenanigans by moving money around or borrowing money and that sort of nonsense like that, because the beneficiary can bring you to court. That will get you in trouble with the law. So if you're going to take on the job of the executor, you need to be transparent, keep a spreadsheet of everything that's being spent that's related to the estate, in case you have to, if there's photocopying or something you have to charge, that you've got the bills for it. If you had to get an appraiser, for the home or something, and they charged a fee, it's not going to come out of the executor's pocket, because it's going to come out from the estate. So you have to have a bill for that. You just want to be as transparent as possible, because it doesn't take much for an executor, for a beneficiary to want to take you to court. And I've seen that happen more than once. So when I was talking about those 100 hours, of those 100 hours, you still got to sell the estate, but then you got to spend another couple of hours to be in court to deal with a beneficiary who's bringing you to court. So now we got lawyers involved. So, and when I say going to court, and I was in court for 7 years. Being in court is not like an episode of Law and Order where we're done in 48 minutes. It's a lot of long time sitting in the hallway and back and forth and that sort of thing. And then we ended up spending $50,000. You want to make sure that you're transparent as the executor, so you don't end up being in court when you don't have to be.
Why do you think family disputes arise during an estate settlement?
Just
and how do you think they can be
Don't talk to your family. No. What you're going to do is, as much as we might think that, we're just going to have a conversation, everybody's going to be happy, and, and right outside our window, there's going to be unicorns running by, and everything's going to be fine, and it's going to be a rainbow. That's not going to happen. This is real life. We're talking about families that are messy, families who pretend they're not messy, but there's always some sort of hidden agenda. There's always, family members who are resentful, growing up. I had a mediator explain to me that what he's seeing now is that family members aren't waiting till the parents pass away to go to court. They're now suing the parents for the estate while they're still alive. Okay. And he also was telling me about, elderly two brothers. I want to think they were 70 in their 80s. He's mediating, and they thought they would come to an agreement. And he went to one brother, says, I think we've got an agreement. And the other brother says, no, I'm not signing. Why? He says, because he's a thief. And he goes, what do you mean he's a thief? He said, when he was 12 years old, he stole a chocolate bar, and I don't trust him today. So families are messy. People hold resentment. So if you need to have the conversations, again, you might dread having those conversations. You need to have those conversations now, but you need to have them ongoing. People may not want to hear what you're saying, but they can't come back and say, oh, I didn't know. So, and there are some people who are, I had somebody on my podcast call them narcissists, and they are the ones that are going to probably be, who are going to probably, be the troublemakers, and they're always going to be out for themselves. You have to be cognizant of those. You have to be aware of them because they're in the family and you expect it from them. So even if they don't come to the meetings or they don't adhere to the rules, at least everybody knows what was being said. That's where the financial advisor, maybe you have family meetings and you, being the third party, explain how the estate is, explain what's going on in the estate, what will happen. So the family members hear from a third person, and if there's any arguments or whatever, then maybe that could be brought out in the family meeting. That's where another added value of a financial advisor could work as well. But families need to have these conversations. They don't want to, they have to take place.
We talk to a lot of, most of our clients are millennials. Most of our audience is millennials. We've had a lot of situations now where the kids are approaching the parents on these conversations instead of vice versa. How have you experienced that before? And if so, how do you feel the best way for kids who are maybe in the dark about their parents who are aging? How is the best way to approach that for them? My theory has been, and call me out if this is silly, but my theory has been the adults, like the kids that are adults now, need to get their own estate plan done and then go and tell mom and dad, hey, I've just done this because I really care about what happens to my kids or the money that we've saved or those types of things. Do you mind sharing with me a little bit about yours so that we can make sure that it's taken care of? Or can we have a family meeting about this? So what are your thoughts on this?
That would be, if you want to bring it up, there's plenty of ways. And one of the best ways is like what you said right there. You could say, hey, mom and dad, I was listening to the Millennial Money Canada podcast. I heard three guys talking about getting, your will and your estate in place. I took it upon myself. I can't afford to go to a lawyer. I'm going to do an online will because I want everything to be organized just in case something happens. What have you done, mom and dad? And that's a door opener there. So that could be one way. Or another way is that, hey, did you see recently that Michael Jackson, Prince, remember Prince, mom, dad? Yeah, Prince, with all his money, all that money, he had no will. Can you believe that? And now they're doing tests to test who the siblings are so that they can, because he died without a will. So now everybody's coming out for the estate. We wouldn't want that to happen in our family. Did you hear about Aretha Franklin? She had 6 handwritten wills. So they had to go to court and they went with the will. So they came down to 2 wills. There was one that was found in between the cushions and there was one that was found in the cabinet with the dishes. And they ended up going with the one that was found in the cushions. Mom and dad, how many wills have you got? I mean, there's plenty of ways to door openers as conversation starters in terms of how you want it to go. You can bring it on yourself, or you could say, hey, I heard about this. What are you doing? And again, depending on the place that this is taking place, this conversation, I mean, you're not going to bring it up at the dinner table at Christmas. Mom and dad, what are you doing about your will? hey, could you pass the bread? You might want to say, hey, after the conversation, after dinner, I just want to talk to you about a couple of things. And then you also have to be cognizant. Don't just spring it if you have other siblings. Say, hey, I want to bring this up to mom and dad because this is what I'm doing. And it could also for you to ask the siblings, what are you guys going to be doing? Just in case something happens to mom and dad, what are we going to do?
Amazing.
Yeah, that's good. I laughed when you were talking earlier about the kids basically taking their parents to court before when they were dying. I think we were referring to this story that they were basically suing their parents because they're saying, hey, you're spending our inheritance. So that is next level entitlement there.
But it's happening.
Yeah, I've read that before. I can't remember where. I was like,
that's
wow.
happening.
Yeah,
that's now a thing. That's actually a thing now. That's yeah, you're right. It's next level entitlement. That's happening all the time.
I know some planners that help clients spend all their money in retirement. That's their specialty is die with zero.
Yeah, that's it.
And I'm sure. I wonder if the kids are very happy with that. That's an interesting conversation to have.
The Die with Zero, it's a great book. And because what I like about it is because he's saying die with zero, because you should experience all the things that you want to experience. Don't wait for anything. Have the experiences. And if you do want to leave something to somebody, do it. But have the experiences. I mean, there's, I hear of 90-year-olds getting tattoos. Don't wait. If you want to do something, do it. Do it today.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
David, you have a book on Executor help. Can you talk a bit about your book and where people can find it?
It's called Executor Help, How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. And it's available where all fine books are sold. For your listening pleasure, you also can get the audio version on Audible. So think of me reading you a bedtime story about Executor, every night. Think of that. Come on. If you want to go to sleep and then you might wake up, hey, what did he say? You can listen to it again. So you got for your listening pleasure on Audible as well. There's an audiobook version. All of the places that you can get the book, you just go to my website, davidedey.com, and you click on David's book, and it's got all the places it's got the links to all the places where you can buy the book.
I really enjoy reading your book. I bought it on Amazon. I use a Kindle, so before bed. But I read your book over the past week, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very insightful, especially coming from someone who had little to no experience in the role of executor and just understanding better the pitfalls, what to do, how to be proactive instead of being reactive, and lots of great information and lots of great questions in there. I think you have 50 questions at the end on your last chapter. So I thought that was great.
50 questions. Those are the most common questions. Guillaume, could you do me a favor? Go online and leave a 5-star, not 4 stars, because if you leave 4, that means you're kind of a hater. So could you leave 5 stars at Amazon for me? I'd appreciate that.
I think I already did at the end because in Kindle you just tapped. So I think I already did.
Did you leave 5? Okay,
yeah.
I appreciate that then. Sorry.
Nice. Hey,
anything you want to do, Sam? Is there something you want to do? Just say it.
I'll go and get those. Give you that 5-star review as well. And
will you buy the book? Thanks. I'm just looking for the stars.
Yeah.
So, David, do you have any last thoughts or comments for the listeners who may be accepting the role of executor?
It's like I said, it's a job that nobody wants. It's a great honor if you want to look at it that way. But take the time to understand what's involved with the job. Have the conversations with the individual who's asked you to take on the job. And if you're someone who's the testator, someone who's creating the will in a estate, don't wait until something happens and then you're leaving your family disorganized and in chaos. So, have the open conversations with your family and be organized and leave the greatest gift of love, because a legacy is not how you leave somebody. I found out that the biggest, everything that I went through, the biggest journey that I found is not, in terms of a legacy, it's not going to be about the amount of money we have or possessions or stuff that we leave behind. It's about how we leave our legacy, how we're going to be remembered. So we want to be remembered for leaving a legacy and not a legacy in a mess.
That's well said. I wonder if this whole discussion that maybe people will start having with their family members will help them even enjoy the present moment even more, maybe living more experiences while everyone is alive, turning kind of this topic into a positive note while the families are harmonious, or while everyone, is still alive, in order to enjoy, their presence more. I think that's at least my takeaway, and I'm looking forward to have those discussions even with my own family members in the near future.
Mhm.
So,
Good.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks, Dave.
yeah,
Thank
David,
you.
it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you very much for your time, and we will link exactly all the links in the show notes. And thank you very much again, and see you in the next episode.